I went from this to this in about 11 months. Stick around to find out how. Hello everyone, SemiRetiredBob here. I talk about the carnivore diet, all things related to the carnivore diet, and miscellaneous odds and ends. Today, we're going to talk about a few mistakes that people can make on the carnivore diet, and we're going to talk about some ways to avoid those mistakes. Sorry about the sun starting off this way. It's a little later than I usually start recording, but I had to wait for it to warm up. And I'll get into the weather here in just a minute, but for those of you that are new to the channel, welcome. I'm glad you're here. You might be asking yourself, Bob, what in the world are we watching here? Well, what you're watching is you're watching me walk. The thing that makes this a little bit on the exciting side is that 11 months ago I couldn't do this. I could barely stand for 2 to 2.5 minutes without severe pain. Now, I'm out here walking every day. Except for the last 2 days where it was just too darn cold. So the main purpose of this channel, besides watching me walk, is to show people that it's never too late to change your life. I'm rapidly approaching my 60th birthday, and basically for the last 40 years since I was discharged from the service, I was slowly sliding further into worse and worse health, including, arthritis, gout, diabetes. And, it kind of capped itself off 5.5 years ago when I had a triple bypass surgery. But I still didn't know what to do because I had been given bad information. Now I know what to do. The last 11 months have really changed my life to where I feel like I finally have a life. For those of you returning to the channel, welcome back. I'm glad you're here as well. A couple of quick notes here before we get into today's topics. For those of you that are channel members, I'll be having this month's Zoom call. I decided to go for a little bit different time and date just to see if maybe some other people could get there. We're going to do it on Sunday the 23rd at 3 p.m. Central. So there's still plenty of time. There's some things listed down. If you go down and click on the join button underneath the video, you'll find the different tiers listed out. But of course, right now we only have 8 channel members. So what I've been doing is, rather than breaking up into live streams and Zoom calls and all the other things, I've just been, regardless of your tier, everybody gets in on a Zoom call. Hopefully once I get done spending all my extra time working on my studio, I can provide some more. Maybe we'll try to do a second Zoom call, or one live stream, one Zoom call. I haven't figured it all out yet, but we'll figure it out moving forward. But for now, not this Sunday, but the following Sunday, or it might be this Sunday. It is this Sunday already, because today's Monday. Sunday the 23rd, 3 p.m. Central. Oh, and by the way, for those that watch my videos often, I'm already all the way up and over that first big hill. And here in just a second, you'll see the branches of that one big pine tree I showed you back last fall that kind of hangs over the sidewalk up here. The other event that's coming up, it's not till July the 27th, which is a Thursday. The Omaha Hard to Kill Summit is Friday, Saturday, the 28th and 29th. So I'm going to have a get-together the day before. On the 27th, we're going to meet up at Putting Plus. We're going to set up grills, we're going to cook hamburgers, and we're going to play some miniature golf. Putting Plus used to be putt-putt golf, but he's no longer in the putt-putt system. So it's Putting Plus. It ought to be a fun time. So plan on that. If you were already coming to Omaha Hard to Kill, plan on being up there for that. It should be a good time. My email address is listed on the About page. Just send me an email, let me know if you're planning on coming, so I can start making initial plans for how big of a grill or how many grills to borrow from people, and just how much hamburger meat I'm going to need. That kind of stuff. Make sure I didn't drop anything. I thought I heard something hit, but it must have been something else. But that's, yeah. So those are the those are the announcements. But anyway, let's get on. My goodness, I'm already several minutes into the walk and I haven't talked about today's topic. I'm sorry about that, guys. But I didn't want to forget to make the announcements that I had to have, because I've been so doggone busy getting stuff done. Here it is, noon. Actually, it's a little bit after noon. Finally got warm enough. Get out here and get a walk. It's, as you can see, I've got on a flannel shirt plus a jacket. It's only 55 degrees out. It is nice and bright and sunny. And 55 is a lot colder than it's been the last week. But it is still not too bad for April in Nebraska. On to the topics. I found this interesting because I've talked about this before, and Dr. Chafee was being interviewed by, I can't remember her name. She has a channel, like 5 Minute Body. They went through the top 10 mistakes, and I just found it interesting that Dr. Chafee's number one mistake was the same thing that I said was the biggest mistake a couple of months ago, and I got a lot of pushback from people saying, oh, that can't possibly be right. Well, the number one mistake that carnivores make is not eating enough. Because meat and fat is so satiating, it can take a while before we really realize that we're not eating enough. And that's why, you can watch Steak and Butter Gal. She has a whole video list on priming. The way I like to think about that, I didn't do that because I've always been a big eater. But basically the concept behind priming is you continue to eat and you sort of push yourself a little bit. And every time you think you can put more food in your stomach for the first couple of weeks, you go ahead and do it. I'm not exactly sure the science behind it or why it works, but it apparently does work because she gets a lot of success out of it with her people. So if anybody knows much about priming, feel free to leave those comments down below. And the number two mistake that they had is the same thing I've talked about before. Eating too lean. You know, because we're taught our entire lives, don't eat the fat. Eating fat will make you fat. All that other crap that just isn't right. But it's hard to break those habits of a lifetime. So we start off with, chicken breasts, and we trim the fat off of our steaks. eating too lean is a really big problem, and we have to consciously break that. And I know you're probably asking yourself, why? How do we judge how much fat we should be eating? And I've always kind of struggled with this a little bit too. But the primary thing to look at is, if you're just looking at a chunk of meat before you cook it, if about 1/8 of your chunk of meat is fat and 7/8 is the lean parts, that's about a 1-to-1 ratio, and that's a good place to start. Some of the science that Dr. Chafee was going into, though, I found very interesting, and I'd never heard this before. I found it very interesting, and that's really why I decided to talk about this. He was saying, as you all know, gallbladder stores bile that your liver makes, stores it and concentrates it, and then when we eat, that bile gets released to digest the fat. And he was saying, you think your body just randomly decides how much bile to store, how much to make and store and concentrate? No, your body is a very well-oiled machine. So if you are eating until basically to judge how much fat you can take in, because he said it's very hard to overabsorb fat. He didn't say it was hard to overeat fat. He said it's hard to overabsorb fat, because your body knows how much it needs, and it'll have the correct amount of bile to digest that much. So we can sort of gauge if we keep upping our fat. I know, as you up your fat, it can cause loose stools, sometimes urgent and explosive loose stools, if you eat a bunch more fat than your body can handle. But the reason your body can or cannot handle it, one of the big things, and of course there's a lot more science behind it and many more other little variables, but primarily the bile. If you don't have, your bile can only digest so much, so if you keep upping your fat until you feel like you're getting gut rumbles and going to have loose stool, at that point you may want to back it off just a hair, and that's probably where your sweet spot is. I thought about this a lot and thought, that kind of makes sense, because it's always been a big mystery, and I mean it still is, but people, well, how much fat should I eat, Bob? I don't know, it's different for everybody. Why is it different for everybody? Because everybody makes and stores a different amount of bile. That just makes good sense to me. I could be completely wrong here. I could have completely misinterpreted what Dr. Chafee was talking about, because we all know I'm just a retired truck driver. What the heck do I know? But in thinking about it, it kind of made sense to me. He was saying people get too much of a perfectionist attitude. And what he was talking about there is, well, I slipped off the wagon. And I've talked about this before. Like, well, I've slipped off the wagon, so now I've blown it, so now I'm just going to go back to the way I was eating. Well, no. Just because you had a bad day, you don't have to let that turn into a bad week or a bad month or a 6-month carbathon. If you make a mistake, just get right back on the wagon and keep going forward. Don't let it bug you. Everybody messes up a little bit now and then. Some people more than others, but don't let it get you down. Just get right back into the carnivore way of eating. It may take a day or two because you had a slip up, but you'll get right back into getting the benefits. Just because you messed up once doesn't mean you're messed up for all times. And another thing that he talked about that I know I'm not really guilty of it. I intentionally do mostly lion diet, which is, basically just ruminant meat, salt, and water. But there's a lot of people that think the carnivore diet is too restrictive because they are spending all their time thinking about the foods they can't have instead of spending their time thinking about the foods they can have. Like I said, I do lion diet, so I just do ruminant meat and salt and water. But you don't have to do lion diet like I do. Carnivore is anything that used to be an animal or part of the animal. So, instead of concentrating on things you can't have, you can have chicken and pork and all kinds of seafood. And if you handle dairy, and I talked about dairy in a video just a few days ago, if you can handle dairy, there's lots of different dairy products, primarily cheeses and things like that you can have. Sausages. One of my favorite carnivore dishes back before I started doing lion diet was andouille sausage and shrimp. Maybe that's what I'll have for my 60th birthday meal. Because I've committed to staying on lion diet until my 1-year anniversary, which is the day before my 60th birthday. My carnivore diet, or my lion diet, I do actually include lard in that. I haven't made any bacon, but I bought a block of lard to cook stuff in, and it's been really tasty. And the lard in combination with my cast iron really gets a nice looking crust on stuff. But just don't think of things you can't have. Concentrate on the things you can have, and it won't seem nearly as restrictive. And of course, as I have talked about many times, I don't actually find this diet restrictive at all. The things I find restrictive is not being able to stand up for more than 2.5 minutes without severe pain, not being able to get out here and walk every day, having your joints hurt so bad that you can't even make a fist, or going to the park with your friends, taking your grandkids to the park, the zoo, whatever, and your whole day is spent deciding where the next bench is going to be so you can sit back down and take a break. That's the restrictive part to me. Let's see here. Is there anything else I wanted to talk about in this? Yeah, and we've talked about this before. Unrealistic goals. Unrealistic expectations. We've talked about this a lot on this channel. All the way from, basically the tagline of this channel, getting 1% better a day, so that you never stall. But, we've talked about how the scale is not your friend many times. So I'm getting a little out of breath here. And I'm slowing down a little bit because I'm going up that last big hill on the backside that goes back up to my street. Of course, if you remember back to my videos in September when I first went around this big block, and this is down towards the end of September, I had to stop 3 or 4 times going up this hill and just stop and breathe for a bit because I've been walking so fast and have not stopped at all. I'm starting to get a little out of breath going up this hill, but I figure that's pretty good exercise, which is really what this is all about. And I like recording out here while I'm walking because I seem to do my best thinking when I'm out here walking. But just remember, the scale isn't your friend. Because if you're only using how much force gravity is exerting on the scale when you step on it as your only marker, you're going to end up disappointed at times. And getting disappointed makes it harder and harder to keep pushing forward. Which is why, I recommend measuring yourself once a month or so that if you get stuck into one of those long times when the scale hasn't moved, you can look and see, well, I must be putting on some muscle, because while the scale hasn't moved, my arms have gone down by 1/2 inch and my waist has gone down by 1/2 inch. So I am still getting body recomposition. I'm just not losing weight on the scale. So don't set unrealistic goals for yourself, folks. And another big mistake they talked about, and I've talked about this a lot, that was number 9 on his list. I had it quite a bit higher than that when I've talked about it several times. But the problem we have with calorie counting and portion control. Now, it's very hard to count calories, so to speak. Tossing all of the actual definitions aside, because we don't actually eat calories. Calories have to do with when you explode it rapidly in a bomb calorimeter, how much it raises the water temperature. So we don't actually eat calories because those are photons. But, sorry, I made it up that hill, and I'm kind of trying to catch my breath in the downhill walk here. But nutritional labels on your foods are allowed to be off by 20% either way. So if you're trying to count calories, you don't really have any idea. Because what if you think, oh, this is a good 1,200 calorie meal. This is what I'm going to have for my first meal. But everything you're on there is off by 20% on the low side. You might only be getting 800 or 900 calories. And all of a sudden, without realizing it, you're back to the biggest mistake of not eating enough. There must have been some wind, because there was, as you can see, I got to go around. There's a tree down here, kind of split right down the middle, and half of it's laying all over the sidewalk and out into the street. So I got to go out and around here, which you don't really know what what the calorie count is. And portion control. This is a tough one to beat because we've been taught our entire lives. You know, in my case, from the gout diet, only eat a palm-sized chunk of meat a couple of times a week. Don't fill your plate up. Buy smaller plates so you psychologically think you're filling your plate up. All that kind of crap. It's very hard to overcome those things. Our years, in case of people my age and older, are decades of being told not to eat too much. Don't eat that much. It's just crap. That's where Dr. Berry and many others came up with the line, eat until you're comfortably stuffed. And that can be really hard to do when you're first starting out. And even if you're not just starting out, you have to be aware, even like in my case, 11 and a half months into this thing, I can still fall victim to not quite eating enough. But that's what I've got for you today, folks. Just remember, if you make a mistake, don't beat yourself up about it. Just stand up, shake yourself off, and keep moving. Don't forget to get out there, be 1% better today, tomorrow, every day. Have a great day, folks. I will see you tomorrow.